It's true. I passed the CISSP exam on my first attempt with about 12 hours of active preparation I spread over a couple of weeks. And in this video, I'm going to outline how you can hack your CISSP exam prep to greatly reduce the amount of time you spend preparing. And no, I'm not promising you're going to go clear the exam with 12 hours of prep, but I am going to give you my 5-point strategy to hack your exam prep and assess your readiness along the way to ensure you're prepared for the big day. And I'm going to connect you with the resources I used and some honest advice to ensure you can pass the CISSP on your first attempt without spending thousands of dollars on the types of resources that aren't going to help you any more than the free or very inexpensive resources that I'm going to connect you with. At the end of the day, a pass is a pass, whether you spend $50 or $5,000. So if it's me, I'm going to spend $50. And this is just the first in a CISSP series I have for you. So stick with me through the end of the video. You're going to pick up a lot of resources and good advice along the way, and a little surprise I have for you to help your exam prep that I'll share at the end. Let's get into it. So let me just start by saying there is no award for the longest study time for CISSP. There is no grand prize. So whether you study for 12 hours or 12 days or 12 months, at the end of the day, a pass on that exam is a pass. So one day a couple of years ago, I ran into an acquaintance of mine at a conference, and he shared with me, I've just passed the CISSP. He's positively beaming. And he shared that he had been studying for the past 18 months, hundreds and hundreds of hours. Yeah, a year and a half. And then he asked me, well, how long did it take me to pass? And I said, well, I prepared with about 12 hours spread out over a couple of weeks. And suddenly, he wasn't smiling anymore. So I asked him to tell me how he prepared. And the bottom line is he spent a lot of time reading material that probably didn't do him a lot of good. And he took more than 1,000 exam questions, 1,000. In fact, I've seen candidates recommend that you take 2,000 exam questions. Please do not do that. I can't promise that you'll be fully prepared as fast as I was. What I can promise is that if you follow my system, you can get prepared a lot faster. But don't throw away time over preparing, assuming that there's a one-to-one relationship between time spent and knowledge gained. So step one in my 5-point strategy is to find an authoritative reference. And it took me about half an hour to do this out on Amazon.com. Now, certainly, I could go to training sites like Udemy.com where I can find many CISSP courses, but then I'm going to spend hours finding the right course and assessing quality, and there's no guarantee. And I need more than just that training course, and I have the perfect resource for you. I'm going to show you my secret weapon for this step, but first, I want to share a story with you, and this is important, so stick with me. I love the CISSP Exam, Study Guide, and Practice Test Bundle from CyBEX by Mike Chappell. So it includes not just the textbook, but 1,300 practice questions, 700 flashcards. These are going to be important. We'll talk about it later. And it has searchable key terms. So if I need to come back and do targeted research, certainly I can do research on the internet, but I have searchable text here, which is fantastic. And you can get this on Amazon for less than $60. I have the link to the least expensive option I could find in the description on this video. If you buy it using the link we put down there, it will give a little kickback to our channel here. So if you'd rather not, don't worry about it, but you won't pay more for doing so. So when you're choosing your answers on the CISSP exam, one thing I do have to say is you need to think like a manager. This is a vendor agnostic exam. It's really intended for that security management professional. This isn't a hands-on technical exam. You're going to be tested on your knowledge across 8 domains related to security. But when you get in the weeds and you're not sure which answer is the right answer, think like a manager, not a technician. That means we're thinking strategically. We're thinking dollars and cents and efficient. This exam is really coming at you more from the perspective of a chief information security officer more than it is a security analyst or a certified ethical hacker. So step 2 in my plan is to implement what I call the 80-20 self-assessment rule. This is going to take you about an hour and a half, and it involves using the practice questions that come with the CISSP exam prep book. Now, if you don't have the book yet or can't afford to get it right now, stick around to the end of the video. I'm going to give you a resource that will allow you to implement this 80-20 self-assessment rule with a free self-assessment. But if you've got the book, you've got 1,300 questions you can go at, and I'd say use about 75 to 100 of those questions, get through a practice exam just to assess where your weak spots are. By 80-20, I mean we need to find the 20% of the material that represents our weakest area, and that's where we're going to spend 80% of our preparation time. Can I predict that you're going to find only 20% of the material where you need to focus with 100% accuracy? No, I can't. But if you have the 5 years or more of experience that's assumed for the CISSP exam, I'm going to venture a bet that it's going to be in that 20-30% range of the material where you need to focus most of your time. If you don't have that experience, then you're really not going to be able to go get the CISSP certification right away. You can certainly take the exam, but you will only be awarded the ISC squared associate status until you build up that requisite 5 years of experience. But this step is important because this hour and a half is going to scope and focus the entirety of your preparation for the exam. Before we move on to step 3, I want to talk to you for a moment about the new exam format that was implemented by ISC Squared a couple of years ago. It's computerized adaptive testing. So if we go back before 2018, the exam used to be 250 questions and it was 6 hours long. But now we have an adaptive format that's 3 hours. It's 100 to 150 questions. So basically the exam is going to go at least 100 questions, not more than 150, and it's going to stop when it's assessed that you've cleared the bar. Testers are reporting out their results in the public space and saying it tends to break on the tens. They might get 100 questions, they might get 120, they might get all 150. But with an adaptive exam, it's adjusting to your ability. It adapts based on your answer. So if you get a question right, assume the next question is going to be more difficult than the last. In fact, as it was explained to me, the engine is aiming for 50-50 probability that you can answer any question it gives you. So the next question is never going to be a softball with this adaptive format. So I think the pro of the adaptive format is it's only 3 hours long instead of 6, so you're not going to have exam fatigue to the degree you would have in the old format. The real negative, though, is that all your answers are final. There's no going back. So when you're not in a CAT format, when we don't have that adaptive format, if you get 10 questions down the road and pick up some nuance that tells you answered a question wrong 10 questions ago, you could go back. With the adaptive format, when you hit next, it's done, it's sealed. And since it's adaptive, the engine's going to serve up the next question based on whether the last was correct or incorrect. And it's 70% to pass the exam, and do bear in mind, it only reports pass or fail. You're not going to get an exact score. And if you fail one domain, you fail the exam. So you not only have to achieve 70%, but you have to pass in every domain amongst the 8 domains covered on the CISSP exam. So here are the 8 domains and their weight. So you can see that they're weighted pretty even. Some are a little greater than others, but by and large, the coverage is pretty even across the 8 domains. And the reason we go through that 80-20 self-assessment in step 2 is we want to identify where we need to spend the 80% of our time. If you're a software developer, software development security covered in domain 8 may be a piece of cake for you. If you're a network engineer, domain 4 around communication and network security may be your strong suit. And maybe you focus on systems like Active Directory and Azure AD in your day job, in which case domain 5 may be an area where you excel right out of the gate. But just know the key here is you have to pass this exam with 70%, and you need to pass every one of these 8 domains. And we could go on for a few minutes about the details of the CAT format, but the reality is there's not much you could do about it anyway. So I do want to answer a question, though, that comes up pretty frequently when it comes to this new adaptive format. So I can already guess the next question you're going to ask, and I'll give you a straight answer. It's just my opinion, of course, but a straight answer. So is the adaptive exam more difficult than the original? Understanding that when they switched to the adaptive exam, ISC² didn't plug in all new questions. They just switched the format up of the exam. So same questions, new format. Is it more difficult? In my opinion, absolutely yes, because in the adaptive format, you can't go back. There's no do-over. I can't mark it for review and think about it and come back to it later, which means good preparation is more important than ever before. So in step 3, I mentioned I created PowerPoint slides for easy quiz and review, and I would use these to quiz myself over my weakest areas, and that's where my partner came into play. My deck was about 180 slides long, and I started with notes from someone else. There were more than a couple of folks that had put study notes out there, and some put them in PowerPoint format. And I recommend you start with some high quality notes from others who have shared some of their preparation material. I don't suggest you build a PowerPoint from scratch because that's going to take a lot more time. But even starting from somebody else's notes, I spent about 5 hours on this step, really poring over the content, making it my own, adding my own flavor on the notes, supplementing from additional information that I'd found on the internet, or even from my own knowledge. You know, there's value in describing things in a way that's memorable to yourself. But check the description of this video. I have a link to some study notes from a couple of other folks that I found to be very helpful and on the button to get me over the bar the first try. We're going to move on to step 4, but before we do, I'm going to answer a question I know you've asked yourself many times. So what materials should I use to prepare for the CISSP? Well, there are 3 categories I think are essential. So for one, you need that authoritative reference I mentioned. You need a volume you can go back to that is a source of truth. And second, you need some practice exam questions, which we can use to assess our knowledge ahead of our heavy study time and then near the end to make sure that we're actually ready. Conveniently included with that CISSP exam prep reference from CyBEX. And additionally, I think flashcards are a good idea for some of that live quiz activity to test your knowledge along the way, to provide some of that repetition that helps that knowledge really sink in. And finally, I think some good video-based training resources are really, really helpful. But these don't have to be expensive. So let me give you some ideas of sources here. So first, I'd say you could start with some of the free YouTube content that I've found helpful, or some of the content that I'll be providing to you in the coming weeks. And if you have a premium LinkedIn subscription, you could go look at Mike Chappell's LinkedIn Learning Exam Prep series for CISSP. And finally, you could go find a course on one of the other cloud training platforms. Make sure you check the reviews. Now for step 4, this is where the PowerPoint comes into play, because you can arrange with a partner to do some very targeted quizzing on your weak areas. And your partner doesn't need to have any knowledge of the subject matter. And in fact, if you don't have a partner, I've got a plan for you as well. But what I did here was tackled my weak areas, and we did quizzing in short bursts, about 15 minutes, so I could focus in on a topic. We'd quiz through the same material 3 or 4 times, and then I'd go away and continue with my prep or my work that day and kind of let that prep sink in. There's always some value in the think time. Now, if you don't have a partner, that's where those flashcards come in with that CISSP exam prep book. There are 700 flashcards, so you have plenty of material to quiz yourself. If you don't have a partner, just don't overdo it. Try to pick a topic or 2 topics and drill down for 15-20 minutes, and then call it for that session, walk away, and take that think time. Let it sink in. Come back a few hours later and quiz again. So that 4 hours I spent in quizzing was spent in many short sessions, and repetition definitely has value. So I remember tackling some really challenging material. I remember trying to make sure that I had all of the information around crypto algorithms committed to memory. I had to tackle that a couple of times before it stuck. So if you have a supportive spouse, that's a great quiz partner regardless of their experience. Otherwise, grab those quiz flashcards from the CISSP exam resource that I mentioned in step 1 if you're on your own. So step 5 is where we're going to answer the $1 million question. Am I ready to take the exam? But first, I want to answer a question that I get quite a lot regarding CISSP exam prep. Should I take an instructor-led training course? Well, my short answer for you there is no, absolutely not. There are plenty of good online training sources. As I mentioned, if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, Mike Chappell has a nice premium course. There are great video resources all over YouTube, and you could go get a $10 or $12 course on sale on a site like Udemy. But there's no reason, in my opinion, to splash out $2,000 or $3,000 for in-person training. And even less reason to pay that much for virtual training. If you want access to experts for Q&A, you can get that through the virtual courses. All of these platforms have a Q&A mechanism where you can talk to the expert. You can go comment on videos like this one, and people who know what they're talking about will connect with you. There's plenty of opportunity to connect with community without splashing out a lot of money. Because even if you do pay out, $2 or $3 grand for in-person training, there's no promises you're going to have access to that trainer after the boot camp is over. So step 5 is the final checkpoint where I'm going to circle back to those practice exams that came with the CISSP exam prep book. And I'm going to spend this last hour going through another practice exam to see how I fare this time. And I'm looking for an 80% or better score to tell me I'm pretty well positioned to walk into the actual exam. Now, if I don't hit that number on this practice exam, I need to have a plan for how I'm going to close that gap in my knowledge and circle back to take this test again. And I'll give you the game plan there in just a minute. Because if you don't get the result you're looking for here, you're going to need to have a targeted approach to circle back and close that gap so you can come back and take this checkpoint again to make sure that you're actually ready. So before I step through that plan, I want to answer a question that comes up all the time for a variety of exams, but is very relevant to the CISSP. So what about using a CISSP exam dump to prepare for the exam, one with actual exam questions? The short answer here is not only no, but hell no. So number 1, you're not going to be able to memorize the questions anyway. I found even the multiple choice questions on this exam were some of the most difficult multiple choice questions I have ever seen. Number 2, memorizing questions is cheating. You're selling yourself short, and you're selling your future employer short, and you're selling your future customers short. You can do this, and you can do it right. Just work the plan. Okay, so I promised we'd cover a game plan for what you do if in step 5 you discover you're not ready for the exam. But first, I want to take just a minute and I want to recap our effort to plan so far. So in step 1, we spent about half an hour to find that authoritative CISSP study reference. Now, I spent half an hour tracking that down on Amazon. You should spend less because I'm here to tell you this is the right reference. That CISSP exam study guide from Cybex has the authoritative text you need. It has 1,300 exam questions. It's got 700 flashcards. It's got everything you need to work the plan. So in step 2, we took an hour and a half and we implement the 80-20 self-assessment rule. So at this point, we spent about 2 hours preparing. And this step is super important because it's really giving us scope information here. It's helping us focus the rest of our effort in preparing for the exam. Bottom line, this ensures you don't spend a bunch of time studying in areas where you're already strong. In step 3, we created those PowerPoint slides. And again, you might spend 4 or 5 hours to do this. You're going to be about 7 hours in at this point. And we're going to do this using material others have provided, the others who've come before us in preparing for the CISSP exam, so don't start from scratch. Other people have shared their exam notes to make this process easier for you, the same as I made this video. Leverage their goodwill to save yourself time. Remember, there's no grand prize, there's no award for spending the most time preparing. And we're going to take this material into step 4, where we're going to go through those live quizzes. We're going to take quizzes that are going to be short, 15-20 minutes long. We're going to focus on a single topic, short burst. So in those 4 hours that we spend with quizzing, we're going to be about 11 hours in, and that 4 hours is going to be comprised of many of these short sessions, sometimes coming back to the same material just to make sure that we remember what we were quizzed on the last time, making sure it's stuck. And again, if you don't have a partner to help you with the live quiz, your spouse is certainly the perfect quiz partner, but if you don't have that quiz partner, use the flashcards that come with the CISSP exam prep guide. And in step 5, we're going to come back and take that final checkpoint, another practice exam. We're going to go back to those 1,300 practice questions in the exam prep guide. We're going to go through about an hour's worth of questions and see where we are. Are we hitting that 80% mark that tells us we're in good shape to go take the real exam? I found I was ready on the first try, but we're all coming from different places, so you may find you're not ready on your first pass. So let's talk when we're 12 hours in and we don't get the answer we want here. What do we do next? So what if that step 5 final assessment tells you you're not ready? You know, the fact of the matter is we all come to the CISSP in different places in our experience and our careers. When I took the CISSP, I had somewhere around 18 years of experience and a lot of miles behind me in terms of security. So my gaps were fewer than yours might be, and that's okay. So here's a plan to help you shore up your knowledge in short bursts of effort. Okay, so when we don't get the answer we want in step 5, we discover we're not ready, we have a targeted approach to circle back and iterate to close our gaps, and I call this the supplemental cycle. How long you spend on this cycle is up to you, but I'd say it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 hours to get through the whole cycle, depending on how much material you're trying to cover. So based on your results in that practice exam in step 5, you're going to do some targeted reading. You might go to the book and do some research. You might go surf the internet and do some research. Then you're likely going to move into your PowerPoint slides and pour over some of your notes there. In fact, I found that when I was doing my targeted reading, that here and there I'd come back and touch up my PowerPoint anyway. So if you get into this supplemental cycle, I expect you may do more of the same. Once you've done that additional reading, you're refreshed, you're going to come back and you're going to do some live quiz, or you're going to work with those flashcards if you're on your own. And this is going to be short and targeted. Again, 15-minute sessions is going to be a good target. You might only do 1 or 2 sessions, though, in this supplemental cycle. Again, this is intended to be a shorter iteration. This is going to be 2 to 4 hours all in. Remember, keeping it short keeps us focused. We avoid fatigue, and the repetition helps. It locks it into your long-term memory, which is actually important because then it's information you can actually use in your job. And then the last step in the supplemental cycle is we're going to circle back and we're going to take another practice exam and see if we hit that 80% mark, and hopefully hit that number this time. But if not, run through the supplemental cycle again. Work the plan, rinse and repeat until you're ready to walk in and crush that exam. And now for that surprise. So on December 15th, 2020, I'm going to try a little experiment. I'm going to publish a free 50-question self-assessment so you can assess your CISSP readiness. So if you're watching this video before December 15th, 2020, know that day is coming soon, and I will put the link to this assessment in the description of this video, as well as in a community post on the channel. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell so you get a heads up when I drop that content. And remember, if you have questions, put comments in this video. Myself or someone else in the community will answer. That interaction you need with other colleagues in the community comes in many forms, not the least of which is the comments section of YouTube videos. And I'll be releasing quite a few videos on the CISSP exam with exam prep resources in December 2020 and January 2021. The next video right now is planned to be an accelerated 1-hour study guide, and that'll be followed by a few other domain-specific videos in a series throughout the next couple of months. All right, and that does it for this video. So if you've enjoyed the video, if you're going to be following me for the rest of the series, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. Take care, stay safe, good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.